5 o'clock, you're live.
All right, welcome to the July 24th meeting of the Quality of Life and Infrastructure Committee. We'll do a quick roll call. Councilmember Risberger, I'm here. Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Carson.
Here.
Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Okay, did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes from our last meeting? Any questions? Any corrections? Okay, so we have two topics on the agenda. So we're gonna start right out with the Public Arts Master Plan. And did everybody get a chance to review both the city staff comments on the draft Public Art Master Plan and the Public Art Master Plan, which I thought I had opened? Hold on a second. There we go. So I'm gonna open the floor to anybody who wants to talk about this.
So how are we supposed to take these notes from the city staff? I was trying to understand this.
Well, maybe I should start then, because I finally, after racking my brain around this, I finally wrote down maybe the direction we want to take is, number one, is this draft the only draft we have right now? Okay. And when did we receive this draft originally? Can you refresh my memory?
I want to say that it was forwarded by the commission. They reported the end of last year.
Okay. So I'm not crazy when I feel like this is a little bit
There's been
Old.
some time.
okay. So the staff made comments on it, had questions. Well, some are comments, some are questions. Have these questions been addressed by the Arts Commission yet?
They have not, until as recently as 2 weeks ago, been sent to them for their review. They now have them and are reviewing them.
Okay.
They anticipate discussing it at their August meeting.
What I noticed when I had to read through the staff's comments, and thanks to the staff for doing all this, it looks like it's a mix of minor corrections that need to be made within the document. Like, for example, on the public art locations map, a lot of things were referred to as electric boxes when they're actually traffic signal controller cabinets. And then things like Lettuce Highway Exit 15 underpass is located in the city, not the town, which that'll impact where this art is put up. But then there's other things that there's a series of questions that they put down that need to be, or clarifications that need to be made that really need to go through this group. And I feel like the group may want to make further adjustments to their initial recommendation to us. But that's about all I've got out of this.
Yeah, no, I agreed in terms of agreed with, thanks to the staff for taking time to put this on. I think at this point, this is in their hands to review and get us back, maybe even in the meantime, they have rethoughts in these particular areas, but I would like to see them take the staff comments and integrate them into the report, and make the additions and address some of the concerns that were raised, and get us back what would be hopefully pretty close to a final draft.
I did find out what TNT Neighborhood Group is. It stands for Tomorrow's Neighborhoods Today, which is a program in Syracuse. So, you guys have anything you want to add?
Is it possible to get the map larger, more defined, more information? Because when I tried to...
There was a link in this. Let me bring it up.
If I hit this public art location in the city of Leon, is that the link you're talking about?
Yep, it's a clickable link. What page was that on? There's no page. Here we go.
That would be helpful to
Page
have
8.
page.
Page 8, public art locations. You can click on it and it brings it up. I did that because you can't tell where any of the possible downtown mural sites are. And when you click the link, then you can click on those 9 different spots and it comes up with pictures. Which opens up a whole series of questions for me because a lot of those are privately owned buildings, some are public buildings, so.
And what is a typical size of that, if we're on that,
Size of what?
of the murals? What is, are we going with a standard size?
I don't think they said anything about a specific size. Did they? Did I miss that?
No, based on location, based on, I mean, if it is private versus public, what will be allowed by the property owner.
That's right, because there was one that was possibly either 2 different murals or one mural that was separated by empty space, I believe. Do we know when the Arts Commission is meeting next?
Yes, to be the second Wednesday, so the 9th.
Have they figured out financing yet?
That's a question that they've asked the city administrator to attend the next meeting to provide some clarification for them. They had questions.
From reading everything they had here and then the staff questions, I feel like that has not really been fished out yet. So,
And besides mural, what consists of art after that? Is it freestanding? Is it attached to something? Is it all of the above?
my impression, it's all of the above. It's the locations of
And this commission makes recommendations and then the council will make the final determination? Or does this commission have the ability, because I thought when we looked that up, they're making recommendations, but not the, right, they're just making the recommendations, the council makes the final approval?
yes, because the money's got to go through us. But then the other question that came up,
No, not the financing, what the art is.
I'd have to go back and reread it since it's been 7 or 8 months since I've read it. Because there was also a big debate about that, because you don't want, on one hand, you don't want art to be determined by the government, but you also don't want art limited by the government. So I thought they were coming forward with a recommendation, and then we would work on financing. But then one of the questions that came up from the staff, or it might have been from Mr. Merzick, I don't know, was saying that we can't, where is it here? Sorry. It's here.
You're talking about the donations?
Yeah, as far as us as an entity, as a municipality, we can't,
Intentionally seek donations of any kind.
yeah, but maybe that was more of art donations, not finances. I'm not sure, but this may be a moot discussion anyway, since it seems like there's a lot of things that still need to be ironed out with how things are going to happen with the financing. But I think overall, they're supposed to come forward with a piece of art that they want to put up, and it comes to the council for approval or not. Does that sound right? Do you remember?
I can't recall, but I'm looking at it quickly here, and I don't see anywhere where it says that explicitly. In fact, it seems to imply that the art itself and the location of the art is to be deemed by and selected by the commission, because they have the artwork selection criteria kind of laid out in terms of what they're looking at, And then right very, within the location selection, it says the Ileana Public Art Commission has review authority over sites that City of Ileana owns.
Mark, where are you reading that?
Sorry, let's see. From the content page, table of contents 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages back, so it's the short page in the back of the map. And it does not state explicitly, it says it has review authority over sites, but it does not state what happens there, so I think that,
Right, but that's the commission's,
right.
not what we pass as what's been codified.
What have we passed then?
That's what I was trying to remember. I was trying to remember it.
Oh, powers and duties? Okay,
That's what
Under-
thank you, Matt.
let's see. Okay. Powers and duties, number 3, the commission shall advise the common council in decisions concerning the selection, acquisition, and display of public art.
Okay, so that speaks to.
With the approval of the common council, the commission shall create and implement a public art ordinance, okay?
I remember that being a discussion point that we all had for a while.
Right. It'd be nice to have that laid out here as well then.
In fact, I remember Councilmember Rafter kind of leading the way on that one.
Right. I think it'd be helpful to have it explicitly stated in here as well, so that it echoes what's in that document.
Well, under number 2, the commission shall review all public art applications received by the code enforcement office, and its approval shall be necessary prior to the installation of public art in the city of Oneonta, unless, excuse me, exempted by the terms of this charter, of this chapter. And then the commission shall identify and recommend the allocation of available funding to assist in the creation of approved public art. So it doesn't come right out and say that the council is the sole authority on approving this, but it kind of alludes to that.
Saying the Public Art Commission is recommending. or
Yeah, the
advising,
commission shall advise the council in decisions.
and approval will be from the council. But I think to Mark's point, if that document was part of, as an exhibit of this document, then the two would be together.
Yeah, I agree.
You could, down the line, 5 years from now, or 5 more months in our memory.
Yeah.
Case in point, right? I could remember that.
Right.
Yep. Okay, so Scott, do you have any thoughts over there on this?
I think you agree with everything that's been said.
I'm thinking there's really not much more to discuss until we get in the next draft from the Arts Commission.
But maybe we can just make Mark's recommendation and Len's recommendation, or Len's recommendation, or I don't know who did it, but
A
the
recommendation.
recommendation to the Arts Commission that gets specifically put into this new revised plan.
The Arts Ordinance.
Right.
It's placed to clear draft. Okay, how do we make that recommendation to the Arts Commission?
You can forward it to them if you'd like.
Sure.
Is Jim still chairing that?
No, it's Andrew Vitolo now.
Who is it?
Andrew Vitolo.
Anything else on Public Arts Master Plan? Okay, that's moving on to the tree planting policy. You want to start on this?
I can.
Sure.
So I was on vacation for the last council, I wasn't here, and I have actually seen the council meeting, so I'm kind of coming into this green, no pun intended. So the city and the council approves policies for DPW to follow, and we have a tree maintenance plan that we follow for planting trees in the city right away. This is, I just want to emphasize, we're not planting trees on private property. The trees we're planting are in the city right away. The trees that I know are in question, 2 trees that council wants relocated, are in fact between the sidewalk and curb. So it is in the city right away. And part of the tree maintenance plan, in 2013, the city hired Forcon Forestry to go through and inventory all the street trees. This is related to the Emerald Ash Borer, I believe. So in 2014, they did this study, and they identified tree locations. I gave each of you a map of the tree locations, and the one landowner wants the tree relocated. If you look on the map, it's number 4182. Right next to the 174, it says 4182. So that tree location was identified in the study in 2014. And actually looking at property boundaries, it looks like this tree isn't in front of their house. It's actually in front of a vacant lot adjacent to their property.
I'm sorry, Chris, can you tell me once more, because I was writing over here.
Sure.
What numbers are we talking?
4,182 is the tree.
Okay.
It's planted in front of a vacant lot, not in front of a house. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Fred doesn't go willy-nilly picking trees. There is a plan that we do follow. This is the plan. The city paid, I think, $20,000 back in 2014 for this plan, and we follow it. The other thing I wanted to read to you as part of an objective of the plan is continue sustainable tree maintenance practices for trimming, pruning, removal, and planting based on best practices as recommended by professionals. The plan was put together by Forcon Forestry, again, professional. Fred Hathaway is a certified arborist and is our city forester. I just want to state all those things, that, you know, we just weren't willy-nilly planting trees.
Fred is a contractor, correct?
Fred is a contractor, that's correct.
Part-time?
Part-time. And he also does a lot of voluntary work too, watering trees after we plant them. He doesn't even charge us time for that.
Yeah, a lot of work.
So I'm a little concerned because in my position, I get a lot of opposition from things that we want to do. Okay, I get opposition for tree plantings. I get opposition for street signs we want to install. I get opposition for curbing, for sidewalks. Someone has a plugged sewer lateral or has a leaking water service. I have to determine where the line begins for the city and where it ends for the city. So I'm concerned about creating precedents. How can we tell this? We have this plan set in place. We're telling a person that, okay, we're not going to plant a tree because you don't want the tree planted. Where do we set a precedent? We already set a precedence. So where do we go from here? Because I can tell you, I have all kinds of complaints about trees that people don't want planted, trees that they're existing, that are growing in good health, and they want them taken down because they don't want to break the leaves and pick up the branches anymore. They don't want to weed eat around the trees. I have complaints about a sign. Actually, I have a new complaint recently in the last week when I was on vacation. Just read the email today. We have a wayfinding sign up in front of 174 East Street. She doesn't want the sign there anymore. She wants it put behind the utility pole. I had a conversation with her today and said, well, it's the sign that was already there, and a motor vehicle hit it last year and it was taken down. We didn't put it up yet because we're waiting for the new wayfinding sign to show up. So we finally put our UFPO marks in to put in the new sonotubes for the new sign. Now she's objecting to it. So the other thing I want to mention is, we've just got all this money for Market Street Improvements Project. What are we going to do if landowners on Market Street don't want us to do the landscaping that the consultants are going to propose? Are we not going to do that landscaping? We have a certain mindset for what we want Main Street to look like. Are we going to want, if a landowner doesn't want a tree in front of their building or business, are we going to take the tree down because they don't like it? So these are concerns that I have. As you guys know, I've been here a very short period of time, but I'm willing to do whatever you guys want me to do. I'll follow the policies that are in place, but I'm finding a little bit of trouble here.
Understandable.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks,
Thanks, Chris.
this is literally the first time I'm laying eyes on this. I looked at it digitally today, but I didn't know that this existed. So this is kind of like the last subject matter that we just talked about, where you get that disconnect because of time and space, and then new faces. On average, how many complaints since you've been in office do you take on trees?
The new trees or tree removals?
Trees in general. I know that you've had a council member, probably in the 5th Ward, that showed you some tree issues.
Gosh, in the last 2 years, 2 to 3 dozen. Easily.
And then I guess continuing on from my perspective, again, for me, sitting on this side, this is literally, I looked at it digitally today. So if I'm not seeing this and we're doing it, then you can understand how the general public will call me up and go, well, Len, why is this happening? And I'm gonna go, I don't know.
Sure.
So it's that communication, I think maybe all of us can do better. And that might decrease your workload of phone calls that you're gonna take from people that are upset. Meaning, the council member that is in charge of this ward, if they had known, he had known, she had known that those amount of trees were going in beforehand, he might have been able to stay off some of this. But in this particular case, I actually went down and I talked to the homeowners. Things are a little raw with them because they still have damage done to their house from a tree that took out their power to their home. And they maintain their trees. I forget how much it was that they've said that they've invested in maintaining the trees that they have on their property. So they're not one of those folks that don't want to take care of trees. It's just that they're a little gun shy right now. I mean, their service cable is still kind of, you can see the repair work.
Sure. But I'm assuming you're talking about 107 River? The thing is, the tree, it doesn't look like the tree is in front of their property. It's on the property next to them.
They admitted to that.
So,
It's a family member.
yeah.
I think one family owns several properties in that section.
So, Len, Chris kind of put it out there for us, I think that's what we're trying to do here. His question was, where do we go from here? And you alluded to, and it certainly came up last Tuesday night, that communication would have helped. So, I mean, we have a plan, and we have a maintenance plan, and we have plans to put things in. Is that the answer? Is part of this plan and part of this whole, what we're trying to do here, is a matter of trying to go out and communicate proactively and consistently with the residents of particular areas. Frankly, personally, I think this is a great grant that we're able to basically put trees in for no cost to the city. And in doing so, able to ensure that neighborhoods that used to be tree-covered neighborhoods are now, as certainly Scott knows on River Street, that big tree that came down, whatever it was, this winter, this spring, all of our trees are aging. It'd be nice to be able to know that we're kind of leaving our communities with an urban forest to cover roads and provide that kind of aesthetic beauty that we all appreciate. Is communication the thing that's going to be the difference in terms of moving forward in the way that we already have a plan?
Communication and maintenance. The maintenance portion of it, that's what I was bringing up, is that I was fortunate enough to have both Chris and John come down on Morgan and look at that, because there was tree issues, and they kept it on their to-do list, and it's been taken care of, and I'm appreciative of it. The neighbors are appreciative of it, but it's that constant maintenance aspect, and I don't think we depend on Fred for doing it. I've seen city staff out there doing it, so I don't know if Fred is the one that's in charge going, this is the street that we need to hit and these are in front of the houses. I don't know what that stands as, because you know, I think our code says that you're not even allowed to have branches go into the sidewalk unless they're, is it 8 foot? Is the height?
8 foot sidewalk, 12 foot in the roadway.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of Fred and my crew, so the streets crew. If our crew sees something that needs to be cut, my office will send a letter to a landowner, tell them that they need to trim the tree because it's within that 8 foot or 12 foot of the road or sidewalk. If I identify a tree that I see I think is dying and it threatens the right of way, I'll notify Fred Hathaway because he's the certified arborist. I mean, I could certainly say, I think this tree is dying, but I rely on Fred to go out there and in fact say, because he's the professional, and state whether the tree is dying or not. And then if he says it's dying and it should come down, I'll send a letter to the landowner, tell them that they need to have the tree taken down. This is private property.
Private
When it's on the right of way, that's all on us. So Fred does the inventory every single year. Actually, I'm coming up here, we're gonna have a meeting in the next week or two to review hazardous trees and limbs that need to be taken down this year that are city trees. We do that every single year with Fred. He goes around, inventories them, meets with myself and John Williams from my office, and then we put out a tree bid for hazardous trees. And we spend anywhere between $30,000 and $40,000 a year in removing hazardous trees. The city staff does do some of the tree removals, but we've kind of been, you know, shying away from doing that as much as we used to.
Alright, because you don't have the staff.
Right.
So if the homeowner doesn't want to take care of the branches, what happens?
So if a homeowner doesn't want to take care of the branches, either our staff will do it, and we'll back charge them for it, we'll hire a contractor and back charge them for that.
That's if the tree's on private property
If the tree's on private property, correct,
and impacting the right of way.
correct.
And the right of way stops at the edge of the sidewalk.
Typically, it's the edge of sidewalk. Where there's no sidewalk, usually you have three rod wide, which is about 49.5 feet right of way width.
You said that we spent $30,000 to $40,000 per year removing hazardous trees?
Correct.
And what is Fred's contract? Can we talk about that, or do we have to go into exec session?
I can go downstairs and look it up, I didn't bring it with me.
I don't have,
Okay.
he's paid on an hourly basis, and I believe we budget somewhere around 8,000 a year, or something.
Yeah. Can I speak for a minute?
Sure.
We used to fund this through our landscaping fund that we had from the tree harvesting that we did.
With the airport.
And every year, once those funds ran out, we had to decrease our budget because then it went back onto the general fund. That landscaping fund has now been replenished, and we will then be able to go back to increasing the budget for the tree work, and it'll be funded through the landscaping fund. We have right now, I want to say close to, well, it's over $300,000. I don't know the final number because the sales keep coming in, and so I just want you guys to know that we'll be able to increase Fred's contract if need be.
And how many new trees are we typically planting in a year?
Normal year, I'd say about 2 dozen. This is an extraordinary year. We planted 12 additional apple trees at Swart Wilcox. We normally wouldn't, you know. do
Yeah, I
that.
mean, I wouldn't count those.
Okay.
Since that's,
25-ish.
okay.
You know, sometimes, you know, a volunteer group, like last year, from the school wanted to do some, so we planted some there. So I think we did like 30 last year, so it's in,
Well,
yeah.
my thoughts on this, Chris, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said so far. I also agree with what you said, that this could be a slippery slope if we start listening to every single complaint and every demand that, you know, I don't want this sign on my property, so, you know, we can't do this for everybody. And then what's gonna happen with the Market Street plan if we can't plant trees down there? I mean, tree plantings are supposed to bring up the entire neighborhood and make the entire neighborhood more valuable. I understand people being upset if they've gotta maintain a tree. What I've seen with, is number one, we've had very poor communication between the staff where they're planting and the council, the staff council and the community about where these are going and when. We've also had poor communication with the residents about the type of trees that we're planting. We're not planting these monstrosity trees anymore, but people don't know that. And you're right, we have a lot of very old trees that are probably gonna be lost in the next 10 years, and you wanna have some kind of cover that is already in place. I also think that when I drove around and I looked at a lot of these trees, a lot of the newer trees we planted in the last 10 years, they are not being maintained by the city. Nearly every day I walk by the park on Maple Street, and I've got to move into the street to get away from the branches, because the branches are like waist high and shoulder high on me. I don't know if it was because they were planted too close to the sidewalk, or just that type of tree, that the way they grew, but it's never been maintained. Scott had showed pictures of trees that have extra leaves and branches growing out of the base of the trunk that need to be trimmed. So my thought is, whatever contract we have with Fred is not enough. I think we're at the point where if we're gonna be planting all these trees in the next few years in the city, which I think are needed, I think we need a full-time arborist. Whether that can be Fred or somebody else, or we wanna somehow tie an arborist into DPW, so they have other duties they're doing in the wintertime. And I'll stop in a second, but the other thing I've noticed is there's times we go 6 to 12 months with a dead tree that's been marked, but it's never taken down. I remember specifically over at Riverside Elementary, there were a few years back, there were two or three of them that were dead, and I was looking at them every day when I came out of work.
They were city trees?
They were city trees, and what I was told at the time, and this is before you were here, is that we had to wait till there were enough to we would then put an order in to have somebody come and cut them all down.
Right.
But in the meantime, everybody's looking at this dead tree that could become a hazard too.
So we can do individual trees, it just will cost more money to take down an individual tree versus taking down 20 of them under one contract.
Well, that's what I'm talking, that's part of my point though. Maybe now is the time we need to seriously talk about having a full-time arborist on staff and not a contract. Because we're not doing the maintenance on these trees that we're planting. We're not doing enough maintenance.
Mm-hmm.
And we're not taking care of the dead trees as quick as maybe we could. So, and if we're gonna be planting a lot more on Market Street,
I don't think Fred will want to do full-time. He's, I don't know, I'm guessing.
Don't say that.
I'm guessing, but he's
Yeah.
an older gentleman, and I think he's looking more toward retirement than taking on more work. Used to, when I first started, was going around trimming trees himself on the sidewalks and leaving piles of brush for us to pick up on Mondays after he did it on Saturday and Sunday. He's not doing that anymore. He's just kind of reeling back on what he was doing and just sticking to identifying hazardous trees, identifying potential tree planting sites, and he's kind of doing more retirement stuff than tree stuff.
but I think it would also be helpful before we do plantings, since we have this map, maybe bringing it to committee first and say, all right, we're doing all this spring, summer, whatever it is, so we're aware ahead of time. But again, I think a lot of this problem could have been solved with better communication, maybe a full-time arborist that people already know that, okay, I'm getting a tree, but I know somebody's gonna come here and they're gonna be taking care of this tree in the median. I wouldn't have to deal with this. I might have to trim around the base of it, but they're gonna make it look good, trim the branches for me.
So Fred gives me a list of the trees, the locations before we plant them, because I have to call in UFPO before we dig the hole. So I have a list before we plant them, quite in advance before we plant them, probably 2 months ahead of time. So I could share it with the council members if that's what you prefer.
I would. And I also find it interesting that the Chemical Council isn't listed as a key player or partner. The mayor is, the city administrator is, but the council is not.
Page deadline?
It's on the second.
It's not numbered, so I would go from the title page to page 2.
Just saying, it's numbered on the digital one, guys.
And Lenny said page 3?
Yes.
Yeah, section 2.
Section 2.
You're beating me to everything. I was gonna bring that up.
So Chris, if you know the locations and you know the type of trees that it's gonna be, I think letting that council member know as soon as you know, so that they can get out there and start having conversations with the residents,
Okay.
I think that would kind of decrease your phone call load.
What are we going to do when a resident objects to a tree?
You know, like I said Tuesday night, everything's on a case-by-case basis. Everybody has the right to come to the council. Everybody has the right to hear their complaint, and it's up to the council at that point to do what it's in the council's preview to do. That's the unfortunate, I mean, everybody has that right. Whether we go and say, yeah, we agree, no, we don't. There's 8 voting members up here, majority's 5.
I understand where Chris is coming from, though.
I
can
do
try to
too.
That's real quick.
But that's what I'm just thinking, like, if I go knock on this door and say, hey, we're gonna be putting a tree here.
What if you're objecting to the tree being planted next door?
I don't know, that one I would be like.
I mean, it's essentially what happened, so.
Huh?
That's what happened at 107.
Oh, I know. But there's also something at 107 you can hold your hand on because we go
Say
down
you have
here.
some.
So-
Chris knows better than I do, but the rule that I try to follow customers at finance window is I treat all customers the same. If I start making exceptions, unless there's a circumstance of why I can waive the penalty or why I can't waive the penalty, I treat them all the same. So the city policy determines what the city's going to do with the public medians in the public areas. If we follow the policy, then everybody's treated the same. We communicate with the homeowner, we tell them what our plans are, and we just make it simple. Anyway, that's the rule I try to follow in the finance offices. The rules apply to everybody equally.
Which is true, but it still goes back to the other point, Ginny, that they have the right to come in front of the council. They have the right to, you know,
Just
I
like-
agree with you 100%. I get
Just like
that.
the customers they've got the right to ask, but I try to apply the same rule to each request. Now, if we faulted in some way, you know, like, for example, our office made a mistake, then I account for that. But anyway, I just try to treat them all the same. I try to apply the same rules to the entirety of the population.
So you're saying that, let's say you're going to the various doors of the homes that are getting the tree, somebody says they don't want the tree, to you as a council member, you're gonna tell them to come down and talk to the entire council?
Here's where you get the part. I mean, we're gonna ask the council members to go and be the face of it. You know, the only thing we can tell them is either A, you can come to the council meeting and fight it, say that you don't want it, or there's specific reasons. Like, I already know, we're talking with Chris for hours about this. If it's on a lateral, if it's over the water, if it's too close to the intersection, if it's too close to the driveway, you know, stuff like that. I mean,
Well, I don't think they would
They
plant it
move
there
it.
anyway, though, in that case.
but, I mean, like I told Chris, I backed him and his crew. I just didn't back our policy because I think we didn't communicate. Is what you said. If we're getting the communication out there and then I think this is where the city's gonna have to make their determination. Is this a defining place that we want to say, you know, we understand what you're saying, but we're gonna do it anyway? Or is it, we'll try to work with you and come up with the best thing that we can do? I don't know. I don't know how to tackle that. That's the, you know, like you and I talked about before, Dave, was communication part was not very good. And I think that's what caused a lot.
Let me throw a different concept in here just to make this even murkier, but I think when you think about it, sorry, I'm gonna. I keep thinking about the public good, right? That in many ways, this right-of-way populated with trees along roads offers a public good, you know, for everyone. That the public equally enjoys it. I love driving down, I was drawn to this town in part because of just, you know, some of the gorgeous roads we have with these great trees. At what level do we not think about the public good in this? So do we, you know, elevate the individual wants or desires over the public good? And how do we kind of measure those or balance those, or maybe they're not in balance? Again, this is what I struggle with, because if in a situation where everybody doesn't want something, all the entire community doesn't want it, the public good is not served in that particular situation. So how do we kind of how do we address that? You know what I'm getting at?
I know where you're getting at. I think part of the answer is what Dave's suggested about having the arborist, because some of the other, in talking with some of the other residents that were, I don't want to use complaining, but were concerns, was the lack of the tree maintenance. I mean, because you walk down about a half a block or so from where they just put up a new one, you have to duck underneath that branch from a city tree in a city right of way to continue walking. So one of their complaints was the city has been historically bad at taking care of things. And I think there's a value to that argument that we haven't. And I think maybe if we have somebody that's dedicated that goes and does this, and I think we can help change and mold.
I think it's a combination of communicating about the trees and telling people the size of the tree, what it's going to be.
Correct.
That's not going to be 200 feet tall. And yeah, and it's going to take time though. If we get a full-time arborist, it's going to take time for people to see this person in the community and then notice the difference in the trees. And I think that'll alleviate some of the concerns. And then I still worry about the person that still doesn't want.
My father always told me something. You'll only please some of the people some of the time. You'll never please all the people all the time. You know, so, I mean.
That seems to speak to staying by our policy then, right? At least that's how I could interpret that from that standpoint.
I just think, I mean, we have a policy, but make sure we're following the policy. Part of that is taking care of things. That's part of the policy, which we are not doing.
That's the biggest part for me that I think the policy that we haven't followed is the maintenance. Chris, sorry. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. I just wanted to state that, you know, we are limited with our staff. We do what we can. We have so many things to take care of. We have 44 miles of streets, have 88 miles of curb line to oversee. You know, the people that you're mentioning the sidewalk, the trees growing in the sidewalk, did any of those people that identified those things, did they notify DPW, let them know that trees are growing into the sidewalk or into the road? You know,
Chris, I don't think anybody's blaming staff here.
Okay.
I'm sorry if it sounds.
Oh, no, we're not blaming you.
I think what we're saying is staff is functioning as high as they possibly can with the space that we've given them. So if we want to do this, we got to be willing to pony up. Exactly.
And Chris, just to clarify, I put the blame back on us on the council. Whether it's not really, you know, our council, past councils, whatever, it's not city staff at all.
I just wanted to encourage anyone listening or anyone here, if you see a problem with a tree, let us know, because the landowners over there at 107 River said that the tree that fell down on their power line, said that they've been looking at that tree for 5 years, which was on private property. They said they called NICEAG, NICEAG did nothing with it. I said, well, did you call city staff? Had they called city staff, the director at the time would have wrote a letter to them and telling them they had to take the tree down. So I encourage people, if you see a tree problem,
Right.
please let us know, because we don't see everything.
And I think the other part of communication is codes versus DPW.
Yep.
Like, because shortly after this, I had something about line sight and stuff like that. They told me it was codes, it was actually DPW. You know, DPW normally does the tree stuff, not codes. So I think that's the other thing, is to get the right department involved at the beginning.
I send out letters all the time. I sent one out not too long ago for West Broadway. The guy cleared it recently. I sent a tree that was dead on Center Street recently. And we send them all the time. On the private property, threatening the right of way. So if the tree's gonna fall into the sidewalk or the roadway and someone notified us or we saw it, we notify the landlord to take it down.
It all goes back to communication to me.
So I've got down here, I feel like we need to come out with an action plan here. So what I have so far is DPW will share locations of future trees with council members who can discuss with the residents receiving the tree ahead of time. Discuss hiring a full-time arborist for maintenance. Educate the public on the size of the trees that we're planting. They're not these gigantic trees like we planted 100 some odd years ago. And that's what I have so far. Anything else? Or are there disagreements with any of these that I have so far?
I think the only other thing was, how do you deal with someone that says they don't want it?
Refer to the policy. Refer to the policy.
What's that?
I said, refer to the policy. That's where that's what you've got to guide you, is the policy.
Mark, would the environmental board be set up to listen to such a complaint? I'm not sure if the quality of life will always be around, so it seems like environmental board has been around for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, certainly they've been around for a long time, and trees is in their purview. They work really closely with Chris and his staff in terms of identifying sites and lobbying for different trees. And we certainly know Dave Hutchinson was the voice of the trees for many, many years. So it's certainly part of what the environmental board does. In terms of your question more directly, they are simply an advisory body. So I think they can, if we wanted to empower them to hear those kind of situations and advise the council or perhaps Chris's staff, I think they could. We would need to certainly give them some very tight guidelines. I think Jenny has already kind of helped, kind of articulate what those guidelines should be. It should be the policy. But certainly, I think they can certainly hear those if that was the case.
What about the Board of Public Service?
Well, because the environmental board, Dave, is listed within this document, within the plan, so. Well,
I think when we discuss this with the council, or I make my report to the council, I may just bring up in discussion to Mr. Marzig about, see if Board of Public Service is a body that could even hear this, since it's a tree planting, it's owned by the city. Is that a way for people, an avenue for people to make a file a complaint? I don't know.
Carrie, I tried looking up an arborist certification, and both Google and Explorer, I'm not allowed to get on, and I'm sitting on the city's Wi-Fi. Not only that, but the environmental board, I don't know what's been put in the codes for their mission statement, what they're charged with. Like the airport commission is there to make recommendations and advise the council on those recommendations. I would assume the environmental board is set up the same way.
Similarly, yeah. They have 6 different powers and duties assigned to them.
Well, we could just ask Dave which he would recommend is the best way for somebody to file a complaint.
Right. I'm just trying to take some of the aggravation off of Chris.
Yeah.
I hear your intent, and I don't object to it. I think we need to think about it, think about where it's appropriate, and give them some guidance in terms of what to do and how to do it. That would be a new kind of thing for them. It's not something that they typically, they're the ones advocating to put the trees in the ground. It would be, it'd be a little change of direction to hear people want to take it back out.
Is there, kind of where you're going with that, but is there a way to maybe put the tree maintenance plan online so that residents can actually read it? So that they know that if they're having an issue with,
Ask the clerk.
you know,
I'm doing the same thing. I'm looking at it.
Yeah, we have a copy that we can put it on Department of Public Works website for people to view.
because I think that was the other thing, because they would ask me what the policy is, and I'm sitting there going, I believe Chris when he tells me what the policy is. I have never, but if it's there and they could see, you know, and they could give like a legitimate, you know, hey, this is within 15 foot of my driveway where you guys put it, that's a legitimate thing that Chris can hang his hat on and move it. Or if it's right over my lateral or my sewer, or, and I think maybe if they can read it and read what the thing is, maybe that'll help with some of the,
Mhm.
But it's also, I think, important to understand all the thinking that goes in behind the scenes, that is, you know, part of this.
I didn't realize how depth this really gets into, and it calls out why this is done, this is this, this is that. You know, it's not like it's just, hey, we're gonna stick this here
Right.
and move on,
Well, as Chris said, it's not willy-nilly.
yeah. So,
So you're, in the recommendations, Dave, you have that the city council will be now listed as one of the key players and partners.
I did not put that, but I didn't have my digital, maintenance plan up here, hold on. You said it was what page? Sorry.
Third page from
Nice
the
job.
title page.
Third page from the title page, okay.
Section 2.
Oh, yeah. Okay. I can include that, I don't think that's a problem adding that.
Chris, what is the top height that these trees grow, do you know?
I don't know that off the top of my head, I'd have to look them up. I mean, they vary, the shorter ones, you can flip the other page in front. So the small species are designed to be planted under utility poles, and the larger species are just planted in areas where there are no utility poles or you have a wider median.
Which here in the plan, Chris, it says number 6 under site selection, only trees with mature heights less than 30 feet should be planted under or near power lines.
Correct.
You can give 2 diagrams.
Where is that?
No, it's right here.
I looked right over it, my apologies.
That's the DEC's Urban and Community Forest Grant Program guideline for awardees. That's a the other thing I wanted to mention, as far as the map that I handed out, I don't believe that those locations took into account underground utilities. Because there are some locations that we have run into where there are underground utilities, and some of those locations don't work.
Right.
So I think that's just a rough guide. That's like a desktop study.
is Fred able to consider that?
Well,
he's
when we
marking?
call up, calling the UDIG, and all the underground utility lines are marked out, that's when we adjust things, based on these standards.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard when you look at this process, 30 feet from an intersection, 15 feet from a driveway, and you have your utilities.
Takes a lot out.
Yeah. And as you pointed out, for 107 River, if that vacant lot does get sold, how wide is it for a driveway to be put into that lot? So, I don't need an answer, I'm just bringing that up, that hypothetically, in the future, you could be looking at someone purchasing that lot.
I can tell you that the tree wasn't planted in the center of the lot, and it was planted to one side of it. The lot's 60 feet wide.
Mm-hmm.
We put the tree to one side. Approximately, I'm going based on what I just drew on my phone, so.
Okay, do we have anything else we want to add to this action plan? Need me to reread it again?
Sure.
Is that a yes?
Yes,
Okay.
better to do it now than question it.
Add common council to the key player list in the city tree maintenance plan, page 5. DPW will share locations of future trees with council members ahead of time, or ahead of planting, who can then discuss with the residents receiving trees. Discuss hiring a full-time arborist during budget planning. Japanese now. Educate public on the size of the trees that we're planting. Anyone, let's see here. Oh, this one I have to change. We'll place the tree policy on the city website.
Done,
Sorry, what?
done.
Okay, check that out. Ask Dave Merzig if we're following policy, which body should hear a resident's complaint about a tree that will be or has been planted?
Well, even for maintenance of the trees, right? I mean, is it always gonna go to Chris's desk to take the complaints? I don't know. I guess.
Too bad there wasn't something you could fill out online.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
I mean, I know you could email
There is a-
dpw.org or whatever it is, but
There is a phone.
but like
so-
a form, and you just.
I mean, that's something in terms of maintenance concerns, I think we could certainly have some conversations with the environmental board about a role they can play in that. I mean, they're already out oftentimes talking to folks and everything else. They've been pretty active about that as well. I mean, in addition to what Chris's folks have been doing. So maybe that's something that could be part of it.
It'd be pretty tough for Fred to be able to hit every single street, every single year. One person doing all of our streets. I just don't see as realistic.
Well, I mean, that
So the
again.
environmental board, those guys are specialists. This is their purview. They know more about trees than I do.
Right, well, I mean, there are some folks that, there's like a subcommittee that focuses on this, and maybe that's something that they can be tasked with, is that, can you receive complaints, and maybe maybe there's a, kind of taking some citizen action to deal with some of these, and those that can't be, maybe it's bringing in, you know, Chris into the conversation on particularly difficult ones. And that might, you know, take some of that, whatever numbers of dozen that Chris has received over the last 2 years, and take some of it off of his plate.
Just having more eyes
Yeah.
looking is better.
I mean, if that's the interest, I can certainly bring that back to that group and see what their thinking is and help them think about the structure that they might need to be able to do that. And though, a bit in their defense, getting volunteers is tough, as we all know, around the city in general, so that they are, you know, they're a bit strapped, so I think we would need to think about what we might be able to do that, so maybe there's some way of addressing that, we can get some volunteers that would both, and it mentions it in the report, both think about helping to plan, and they've been trying to do that, as well as identifying the maintenance issues and maybe addressing some of that.
And then just kind of trying to be proactive. How difficult is it to get a certification to be an arborist?
I honestly do not know the process.
Right?
Jenny, you're an arborist? I didn't know that.
I was just gonna suggest that we could have the purchasing agent put out a bid of some sort to see what type of responses we got for, forestry type services besides Fred or Fred's company, to see, just to see what else is out there. I think trying to find an employee for it would be very challenging, and I would probably also think having a professional company, that had a larger team, may be an option to consider. And I could ask him just to go into the purchasing world and see what is out there, and we could give that information to Chris.
Yeah, that's where I was headed, because I was thinking Aspen's got to have certified arborists on theirs. So if they would be interested in maybe, because I just don't want you to all of a sudden be stuck.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so I'm adjusting that one recommendation here. So discuss hiring a full-time arborist or putting out a bid for forestry service for the city. Sound good? Chris?
I think I like the idea of the forestry service versus a full-time staff person, because I don't think this is gonna be a full-time position. Once things get cleaned up, I don't think it's gonna be a full-time position, say 2 years, 3 years out.
Yeah, ideally, that's the case, right? You've cleaned up everything, you're just dealing with the one-offs that come up and everything else, yeah, I
Right.
agree.
Okay.
It's long-term thinking.
And if we remember back at last year's budget, we had several requests for new positions, and I'm expecting to have those requests repeated. So,
So we need to prioritize our new positions.
Unless we could double it up with something else like arborist / finance chair.
Well, and it seems like we have potential budget, so we could use that budget from the watershed trees for that.
for
So,
forestry services,
yeah.
which, and I think it would be much more economical to do it through a professional service. Also, employee versus independent contractor, just to kind of get down in the weeds and be a little nerdy, there's IRS, there's the 20 rules of IRS. I don't know if we would have a supervisor for that forestry service as an employee, because we would not be able to instruct him or supervise him or her to know what to do. They would be deciding that instead of us. So I really think it's more of a contract than it is an employee.
Right. I like when you get out in the weeds, I learned something, so it's always helpful, thank you. I think that would address our concerns, you know?
I'm also adding another one here, unless you guys disagree. I said add a maintenance portal on the city website for tree maintenance requests. But,
Skip.
but depending on what do we do for forestry service versus arborist and such, how that falls out.
Well, Chris's office is gonna have to shake that out, because you're talking about filling out the DPS one?
I'm a little concerned with that, because once we're notified, we have so much time to address things, like sidewalks.
We have to be really careful, because once the city's put on notice for something,
It's a liability.
the clock starts to tick. and
So
then,
maybe we should wait to see how things fall into place about having a service dealing with our trees first.
What do you think about that piece?
The email too, so.
Yeah.
It'd be the same thing on an email, if they email, the clock starts.
Okay. All right, I'm removing that.
Yeah, liability's real funky.
Okay, anything else? Does anybody have any other item they want to discuss?
Speed limits on West End Ave and Morgan.
Did we get the speed study?
But we're looking to get, we haven't had a speed study done, but we're looking to get a,
I think you got the meeting Thursday, right? And you had finance here.
yeah,
Yeah, I think I brought it up in finance the last time, and Greg, I thought, was looking into it, but I can't remember if it was finance or if I said it here.
you
I can't remember which one I said it in,
find out on Thursday, right?
but
And Len, your thinking was, if I'm trying to recall, sorry, a lot of these conversations went together.
Do both streets at the same time
Yeah,
and just,
Get a sense on what the real habits are around that
Correct.
particular area.
or maybe even like Chestnut Street in that area also, if we had 3 of those, because it's kind of funny, before this individual called me to complain, Delina and I were on our back patio, and I was listening to this little hot rod thing gearing up, doing this thing, and then the next day he's calling, he's upset.
is Morgan in the city?
Yes,
yeah,
Yes, okay.
we only have one of those radars right now,
Yeah,
we're
right.
looking to
We
purchase
have one now, and we were suggesting
Yeah.
earlier this year to purchase 2, because I think Crystal was the
Morgan Ave.
$4,000.
I believe so, yeah.
Something
a
like
piece.
that. It was low cost, high impact.
We have it on the finance committee agenda for Thursday.
Nice, thank you.
Just to get in advance of that, what was the approximate cost on one of those counters?
Oh, about $4,000
Oh, wow.
okay.
a piece.
Didn't realize they're that costly.
Costly? I figured that was a good deal.
I received lots of phone calls about speeders throughout the city
Right.
all the time.
Yeah.
I was speaking with a woman today, lives on East Street, said that, in the school zone, that she says someone's doing 60 miles an hour past her house every single day.
Right.
But,
As we learned from that study, it's perception.
right,
So I'd like to see the data.
yeah,
I've been taking the complaints, now I'd like to see the data.
yep,
And we learned is from that study, there might be some correct perceptions.
Yeah.
yes.
I do like what we did though on the corner of East and
Hazel?
Hazel, where the curb is now bumped out more.
Yes. We made it more of a dividing line between Woodside and Hazel, more easy to cross.
You can't just jump from East Street doing 50 miles an hour and right on the Hazel.
Yes,
Not that I've ever tried to do that, but I can see how that would be tempting to for some people to scoot through.
our plan, I don't know if you noticed, a detectable tile at East Street going across, but someday we wanna go across with a sidewalk on the water treatment plant side. We
Yeah.
wanna do a speed table
Yeah,
to slow traffic there. That's our thought.
I was just up in Rochester and I had a million of them to go over in the neighborhoods up there.
Did you like
the
them?
tables,
It's way better than going over a speed bump. And it wasn't that bad. I mean, it forces you to slow down.
Mhm.
But it's not with a speed bump where if you're going a little bit faster than the speed limit, you're gonna feel it and you feel like your whole car is jostled everywhere. But you definitely slow down when you go over.
We were hopeful to put them in River Street, we just didn't have the budget to do it. We had them designed, but didn't have the funding.
How much are they?
They were very expensive. The ones on River, I forget what the alternate was. It was several hundred thousand.
I was gonna say, it was at least
Really?
300.
Yeah.
I think it was at least 300,000 for that alternate.
Yeah. But there were
For
3 of
one.
them. There were 3 of them, I believe, on
Okay.
that. So about 100, I'd say 100,000 each. Because the issue is it affects drainage. When you put a speed table in, you gotta figure for drainage on all 4 corners now, and it's not as simple as just putting in a speed table. You got stormwater to worry about.
How
And
much
so-
of a rise is that?
It's not a lot, really.
I think it's only about a foot, 6 inches to a foot
Yeah.
rise.
And it's
But it's
gradual.
done over like 30 feet, say.
Are there specs that kind of govern like the slope on that?
Yes.
So ones I've seen of, like Dave was saying, you wouldn't take it on the other side of your car, you just kind of go up on it and cross it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a mini ramp,
Right.
you know.
And we paint, are they painted where you were?
Not well. So there were a couple that I had to slam on the brakes because you didn't even see it until you were right there.
They should have cross hatching where the slope begins
Yeah.
and where it ends. It'll be crosswalk. Future,
Yeah.
future.
And thanks for explaining, I didn't know the extra piece about the drainage, but you're right,
I wouldn't thought about the drainage.
If you don't do it, they'll
That's
pull,
why we hired you.
the water will pool.
Right.
Okay, anything else?
So that's why the number's going up, because I'm thinking, how is that plastic $100,000? It's the stormwater system that you're tapping into, that's where the money comes in.
Yep.
Right. Yeah, asphalt's pretty cheap.
Once you get into use data, everything's expensive. If you're messing around with stormwater, they're making some money.
All right, if we have nothing else, I move that